myself here. We went last week, and while we were visiting in Oklahoma, we went to see this movie that has just come out. It's called the greatest or the best Christmas pageant ever. And maybe you all have seen it already. Maybe you watched it a long time ago. Maybe you read the book. I had no memory or no knowledge of it whatsoever, that it was a book and that it was an old movie, until my wife told me that she had to read the book when she was in school. But it's a good movie about a Christmas pageant, the best Christmas pageant ever, obviously. And really watching it, it got me thinking about all the Christmas pageants that I was a part of, that my church did growing up. You know, I don't know that a lot of churches now do Christmas pageants, but even when I was a kid, which was not that long ago, Christmas pageants were still a big deal, and they were still a play. And for the most part, all the major players, all the main people in most Christmas plays are the same people every single year. You always have the same characters involved. And the oldest kids in the Christmas play, or in the children's ministry, always played Mary and Joseph. And it was a plus if they were actually involved in like a sixth grade love relationship, so there was some natural chemistry on stage there. But they were always Mary and Joseph. And then the most recently born baby from the congregation, they always tried their hardest to make them play the baby Jesus, even if that baby was 6 months old and was already 20 pounds. They would try that their best, but there was also always a baby doll on reserve, because even though they knew every single year that this baby, it's not going to work out. A baby can't sit through a Christmas pageant. So they always had a baby doll there available. Usually, the pastor's kid would take the role of whoever had the most speaking lines. Maybe that's a narrator, maybe it's an angel, whoever it was, because nobody else wanted that role, and the pastor's kid just didn't have a choice. So, sorry, Maya and Carter, there's just some things about being a pastor's kid you just get thrown into, even if you don't want to sometimes. The wise men would always be played by the tallest kids in the children's ministry, because to be a wise man, to be a king, to be a magi, you had to stand tall, and you had to have a beard, even if it was a fake beard. The shepherds were always played by some kid who came from a farm, whose family just happened to have some kind of a crook or a staff or something that they could use. And then you took the rest of the kids and you put them in some sort of sweatpants and sweatshirt with cotton balls glued to it, and they were the sheep. We all have this picture in our mind of who was at the nativity scene, or who would be a part of that play. And it is largely informed by the birth narrative that we read in the Gospels. And so for the next 4 weeks, we're in this series called The Cast of Christmas, where we're going to be looking at some of these characters, some of these individuals who were there at the birth narrative, who were there at the scene, and who are these real-life characters that significantly contribute to the story of Jesus. You know, there's a lot of different types of people when it comes to Christmas decorations. You have early decorators, you have the day after Thanksgiving decorators, and you have the week of decorators. You have big-time decorators, you have very minimal decorators, you have people who don't decorate at all. Well, my wife is an early decorator, and she's a big decorator. She loves her Christmas decorations. When November the 1st rolls around, it looks like the North Pole put a branch right in our neighborhood, and it's at our house. That's just how we roll. Bree really loves her Christmas decorations, and she works really, really hard on them. So I know that she would love for you to drop by and see them sometime. But one of her favorite pieces is her nativity set. You might have a nativity set at your house. Several years ago, she started making this wish list of all the pieces of the ones that she wanted for this specific nativity set. And she started writing a list of the things with this plan of like, I'll buy a few every year. This was when we were first married. We were broke. We didn't have money to buy a full nativity set. But between her parents and my parents, she wound up getting the entire set the whole year, or in 1 year. So we have Mary and Joseph and Jesus, and we have the wise men, and we have the shepherds, and we have all the livestock. And somehow we have an entire legion of angels. I don't know, she got like 14 sets of angels. So we have a whole bunch of angels at this nativity set. But do you know who is missing from the nativity set? who we don't have, and who I'm actually pretty sure I've never seen as part of any nativity set ever, is the prophets. There are no prophets. The prophets play a pretty significant role in the Christmas story, but they never get credit in anybody's nativity set. There's never an Isaiah or a Jeremiah or a Malachi or Micah. Who are the prophets and what role did they play in the Christmas story? Well, the prophets came onto the earthly scene long before Jesus was born. And they really only had one purpose, and it was to prepare the people for what was coming, to prepare them for who was coming, to prepare them for what God was doing. See, prophecy plays a big role in our faith, and the Old Testament is full of prophetic statements about Jesus and about the Lord's plan for the world. We read prophecy, obviously, a little bit differently than those who were living before Christ read it. But when Jesus entered into our time, prophecy started becoming illuminated a little bit more for us. So we read it a little bit differently than those who would have read it before Jesus stepped onto the scene read it, but it still provides us with a valuable framework when it comes to understanding the mystery of the gospel and the mystery of the Christmas story and the mystery of what Jesus was doing. When we read prophecy about Jesus, it helps us validate who Jesus was. It helps us validate that Jesus was, in fact, who he said he was. That he was the person that he claimed to be and who we believed he would be. But it also helps us to see that he was the plan the entire time. And you see, long before Jesus breathed his first full breath of earth's air, he was reigning supreme as part of the triune God and waiting for the right time to step onto the scene. The original recipients of the Old Testament prophecy read it, and it added to the anticipation. It added to what they were hopeful for. It added to what they were waiting for. And it wasn't that they were knowing exactly what was going to happen, but they were anticipating. They knew that the Lord had a plan. They knew that the God who had called this group of people, who had set this group of people apart, he had a plan, and they were just waiting for it. And isn't that what this Advent season is about? It's about anticipation. It's about waiting. It today is about hope. Did you know that it's not Christmas yet? It's not even the Christmas season yet. Christmas season doesn't actually begin until December 25th. Now, we're talking like liturgical calendar stuff here. But Christmas season is not actually here yet. Christmas begins to the 25th and then goes on from there. This season that we're in now, this season that is leading up to Christmas, is called Advent. It's a time for us to prepare for Christmas. It's a time for us to patiently wait for Christmas. It's a time for us to anticipate Christmas, to anticipate with hope. So what is there to anticipate? What was there to anticipate? What did the prophets say about Jesus, and why did it matter? Well, the Bible is full of prophecies specifically about Jesus. And for that matter, when you read the Bible through the framework of creation, fall, redemption, renewal, you recognize that the whole thing is about him. And we see prophecy fulfilled in the genealogy of Christ. There are quite a lot of prophecies that deal specifically with the family tree of the Messiah, the lineage that he came through, the place that he came through. The Messiah, it says, would come from the line of Abraham. Genesis 12:3 says, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you, he's talking to Abraham here, in you all the families of earth shall be blessed. The Messiah would come from the line of Isaac. Genesis 26:4 says, I will multiply your offering as the stars, or your offspring as the stars of heaven, and I will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring, all the nations of earth shall be blessed. The Messiah would come from the line of Jacob. And all of these are the Lord speaking to these people. So speaking to Jacob, he said, your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of earth be blessed. He would come to the line of Judah. In 49:10 it says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. He would come from the line of Jesse. Moving over into the book of Isaiah, it says, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his root shall bear fruit. And then finally in Isaiah chapter 9, it says that he would come from the line of David, King David. Of the increase of his government and of the peace there will be no end on the throne of David and over his kingdom. He will establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from this time forth forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. The Old Testament was very clear that from a certain line, from a certain family, from a certain lineage, the wrong that was done in the garden would be made right. And there were a lot of other people in the world at this time, but it was through this specific line that the Savior would be born. Fast forward to Matthew chapter 1, it says in verse 2, Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Go down to verse 6, and it says, and Jesse the father of David the king, and David the father of Solomon. That's the genealogy record of Christ. So way back in Genesis, what they said, this is where it's going to come from. We read in Matthew that that's exactly where Jesus came from. That's the exact line that he came from. What these lineage prophecies shows us is that God has always been a trillion steps ahead. We can trust that everything is in the sovereign, omniscient hands of God, who sees all and knows all. My friend Jared, he used to work as a general contractor. He built homes for people. And if you're not sure what a general contractor does, basically, they take your money and they tell people what to do. But it's obviously a lot more complicated than that, because they know if you try to do it yourself without any knowledge of the steps, it would take you 5 times as long. They know what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, in the time frame that it needs to happen. And so they are basically aligning the stars from the beginning to where you have a patch of dirt till the end whenever they turn the keys over to you. They're making sure that everything happens on a timeline. From the day they start, they know exactly what's going to happen on what day in this 6-month span or however long it takes them to build a home. They're constantly aligning, and they know from beginning to end exactly what's going to happen. They're steps ahead of everybody else when it comes to building a home. When we combine the lineage prophecies, the history of Israel, and the lineage narrative found in Matthew chapter 1, it is clear that God was orchestrating this from the beginning, and that He's always been and always will be an eternal amount of steps ahead of what we can fathom and what our knowledge shows us. Perhaps the most well-known prophecies of Christ have to do with His geographic origins. The prophet Micah told us where the Messiah would be born. But you, O Bethlehem, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old, from ancient days. We know from the birth narratives in Matthew and Luke that Jesus was in fact born in the small town of Bethlehem. In Matthew 2, the author wrote about a prophecy telling us where Jesus was raised. Matthew chapter 2:23 says, and he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, and he would be called a Nazarene. We don't actually have a written and canonized prophecy stating that the Messiah would be a Nazarene. What most people assume, what most scholars assume, is that the gospel author Matthew here, he's recording something that had been said by well-known prophets, by multiple prophets, in fact, but wasn't ever actually written down. What we know about Bethlehem and Nazareth is that they were both very small, very insignificant, very humble towns. Some historians estimate that these towns were as small as 200 people. They give them a generous estimate, a maximum estimate of 1,000 people. These are not large towns. These are small people. These prophecies reveal something to us about the operations of God. He does not only use the biggest and best. He doesn't only use the brightest. He doesn't only use these places that we would think. Sometimes He uses the small and underwhelming and dull. There are 2 small towns just east of here, just across the state line in Oklahoma. Spavinaw, Oklahoma boasts a population of 350 and has nothing but a post office and several abandoned buildings downtown. Commerce, Oklahoma is a little larger, hovering right around 2,000 people, but would still be considered a small rural town by most. Neither of these towns is known for high levels of industry. Neither of these towns are known for high levels of prestige. In fact, most people have never even heard of these towns. But on October 20th, 1931, in Spavinaw, there was a baby born who's named Mickey Mantle. His family moved to Commerce when he was young, and he eventually went on to become one of the greatest baseball players of all times. He won 7 World Series while playing in 12. That places him in the top 10 of all time. He is widely regarded as the greatest switch hitter who ever played the game of baseball. He is not someone that you would expected to have been born in Spavinaw or to be raised in Commerce, but sometimes great things, great people come from small and seemingly insignificant places. Well, most people would have never thought that the Messiah would come from Bethlehem. They never thought he would be born there. According to Micah, it wasn't even counted among the clans of Judah because it was so small. And no one thought that the Messiah would be raised in Nazareth. In fact, some of the pushback against Jesus was because he was just a carpenter from Nazareth. But one of the themes that we see over and over and over again in Scripture is that God uses unexpected people from unexpected places to do unexpected things. And the prophet Isaiah and the prophet Micah, however, they spoke to the heart of the Israelite people. They gave these people the most hope. They gave them the most reason to anticipate the Messiah's coming. Isaiah 9:6 says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Micah wrote in his prophecy, "And he shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall dwell secure, for now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be their peace." That's coming just on the hills of when they said he's going to be born in Bethlehem. And back to Isaiah. It says, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and his name shall be called Emmanuel," which means God with us. At the time that these prophecies were written, the circumstances for Israel were not very favorable. They were not in a good place. You can read in the Old Testament from a historical perspective, and you see that the people of God, they were just up and down all the time. They would serve the Lord, and then they'd turn their back on God, and then something bad would happen, and they would turn back to the Lord. And this cycle just kept repeating itself over and over and over again. They spent a good, significant portion of their time out of God's favor because of them turning their back on God, and because of the leaders that they had chosen were turning their back on God. And this led to the loss of much life in battles and in poverty. It led to the nation of Israel losing its sovereignty and becoming controlled by foreign nations, namely Persia and Babylon and eventually Rome. The Israelite people believed that God had set them apart, but so far what they were seeing did not help them to see that. They believed that he only wanted good things for them, but in their disobedience, they put themselves in situation after situation where it was hard to have faith in God, and it was hard to believe that he was still with them. In the midst of their turmoil, God sent word by the prophets that he would bring a leader to them that would guide them back to himself and would bring peace in a time where they really desperately wanted peace. And not only would he bring peace, but he would be with them in a different way. That word Emmanuel means God with us. Isaiah prophesied that a child would be born in physical human form. That he wasn't just going to be with them through the words of the prophets. He wasn't just going to be with them through the occasional spirit dwelling among them, but he was going to walk among them in human form. This would be no ordinary child. This would be God with us. John described him as the Word in John chapter 1. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Move down to verse 14. He said, "And the Word became flesh and he dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. The glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. You know, I think that every person has in their life somebody who just brings peace even to a stressful situation. Do you have anybody in your life that just kind of helps to level you, that just kind of helps to bring you back to earth whenever you're stressed and you're going nuts? I have 3 of those people, and they happen to be the ones that live in my home with me. And now certainly it's a different kind of peace than what these people were anticipating. What the promised Messiah was going to bring was a solution for the unrest. And Bree and Carter and Maya, they may not be the solution to the unrest that's going on around me, but their presence brings peace to my heart. And I would not pretend to know what these people were feeling, to know what the Israelites felt like, walking in their shoes. I imagine that it wasn't good. I imagine that it was difficult, but I also imagine that the promise of a leader who would bring peace to their world, who would lead them in a good way, is something that they held on to very tightly. It's something that they looked forward to. It's something that they anticipated. It's something that they hoped for, that everything that had been made wrong, that God would make it right. But you know, of everything that the Israelites had going against them, it wasn't this political unrest that was their biggest problem. It wasn't that they were losing battles, that they were losing life, that they were stuck in poverty, that they were in this place where they just felt like nobody was there, that God wasn't there, that they were being subject to foreign entities. Of everything that they had going on, their biggest problem was their sin and the separation from God that was caused by it. However, Isaiah gave them something to anticipate here also. It says, surely he has borne our grief and carried our sorrow. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Do you see the theme there? It's all our problem. These are our issues. But God is the one dealing with them. Isaiah is giving the prophecy. I know you have issues. I know that you have iniquities. I know you have sorrows. You have transgressions. You have grief. But there's going to be somebody who comes along and he's going to take care of that. He continued on. He said, upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. And with his wounds, we are healed. Ultimately, the coming Messiah was not coming for political freedom. He was coming for spiritual freedom. The bonds of sin that held the people captive, the bonds of sin that held the people in a place of separation from God, that's what he was coming for. And less than 2 centuries after the prophet Isaiah spoke these words, the prophet Malachi would speak the final words to God's people before his Messiah arrived. And the Messiah did not arrive on the scene until 450 years after Messiah gave the final utterance from God. All that the people believed was going to happen seemed to stop. All that they were hoping for, just silent. It just came to an end. They were separated from him in a time when they most desperately wanted to be near him. They were not hearing anything from him in a time when they most desperately wanted to hear from him. But after 450 years of silence, the prophesied baby was born in the prophesied place, in the lineage of the prophesied people, in the manner that it was prophesied. The silence was broken. The people heard from God once again. And for over 30 years, he walked among his people, loving and ministering to them. And as he lived, he continued to fulfill more prophecy. But at the age of 33, he fulfilled Isaiah's prophecy. He took our transgressions to the cross. He took our iniquities to the cross. He took our sorrow to the cross. And he was punished for them. He died the death that we deserve. But it wasn't before he made some prophecies of his own. John chapter 2:19, Jesus said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." You see, the Jews mistook Jesus' words here to be about the temple in Jerusalem, this house that they had built, this house that they went and worshiped at. But Jesus was talking about his body, and raise it up he did. 3 days after he died on the cross, paying the punishment for our sins, he walked out of the tomb, and he made a way to ensure that no one had to live separated from God. He made it possible for all men in all places, in all times, to be with God. And not only did the Israelites who put him on the cross benefit from the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, but you and I, if we will follow him, we are benefactors to that. And today we find ourselves once again waiting. We find ourselves once again anticipating. But we do not find ourselves without hope. On this first Sunday of Advent, we are anticipating what the season will bring. I know that the kids that are in here with us today are waiting in hopeful anticipation for Christmas. I bet most of them have already made a list of some of the things that they want for Christmas, and they just cannot wait to see what they get. I bet there are parents and grandparents who have already gotten some things bought that they cannot wait to give to their kids, grandkids, other loved ones, to watch them open it up, to see the joy on their face at the gift they gave. And I bet there are some people who are just excited and planning for the family gathering that will take place when everyone comes back home for the holidays. My family this week at Thanksgiving said one of the most beautiful things to me. Hey, let's not mess with all the gifts and the hubbub. Let's just get together. Let's just go out to eat. And I'm for that. That's what I'm looking forward to with my family in Oklahoma. Advent is truly a season of anticipation and hope for the good things that are coming. But what if it's hard? What if this is the first season without a loved one? What if the finances are tough this year? What if there's somebody missing from the table, and they're not missing because they died, they're missing because they're estranged from your family? What if sitting at the table this year there's a new sickness, there's a new illness, a new diagnosis that you didn't have last year? What if this year just looks different for any reason? Can we still anticipate? Can we still be hopeful? You know, the truth is that even though so many of the prophecies have been fulfilled, and even though we are no longer separated from God, we still live in a broken world. We still live in a place where brokenness exists, where Christmas might be difficult. And maybe for some, that's on full display this year. But we can take heart because it has been prophesied that Jesus will come back for us and it will all be made new. Acts chapter 1:11 said, the angels are talking, said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This same Jesus who was just taken up from you in heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." Just after Jesus has ascended into heaven and those present were watching, an angel appeared before the people and assured them, it's all going to be okay. The same way that he just left you, he's going to come back that way someday. He's going to come back. We don't know when, we don't know how, but we know that the God who sees everything, who holds it all in his hand, he has a plan. And Jesus will be back for you. So for now, we wait. But we do not wait as those without hope. We do not wait as those who don't have a promise. We wait in hopeful anticipation that Jesus will come back. And when he does, he's going to make all things brand new. We pray with me.